Okay, should we get started? Hello, everyone who has joined us for what is going to be a very interesting panel. At least I believe it will be. This discussion is going to be on virtual assignments and our role as global mobility providers. And before I dive into the topic, let me just quickly introduce myself. Tracy Kautzman with Impact Group. We are a company that specializes in career development in 3 different main areas. In the relocation industry, we're most known for the partner support and cross-cultural training, but we also specialize in outplacement when employers have to make cuts in their teams or restructure their teams. And the 3rd area of expertise is in providing talent development coaching. Laura, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are. I'm Laura Levinson. I'm the global practice leader for our consulting and advisory services group at Weichert. And in my role, I do everything from policy counseling to corporate clients, as well as best practice, thought leadership, things like this. And I'm just really happy to be here.
Thank you. Kay?
Good morning, good day. Kay Kut, I'm the CEO of Silk Relo. We were formerly known as Asian Tigers Mobility, and we had a branding change on 1/1/20. I have responsibility for the Asia Pacific region, and that encompasses our DSP, the visa migration, and then if we're using the moving services. I'm based in Hong Kong, but virtually on an assignment as I speak today out of North America.
Perfect. Thank you, Kay. Lucy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lucy Foster. I also work at Impact Group. I am Global Account Manager, which is what most of you would know me for, but I'm also a career transition and cross-cultural coach with Impact Group as well.
Thank you, all of you. So some of you may be actually asking yourself, what is a virtual assignment compared to a virtual manager? And I'm going to read a definition. Welsh and Al say, a virtual international assignment are postings where an employee does not relocate to a host location, but has international responsibilities for a part of the organization in another country, which they manage from their home country. Mercer adds that the virtual assignment implies focusing on work for a specific location and in their time zone. So due to this global pandemic that we're facing right now around the world, companies are actually considering virtual assignments as an option instead of the physical move we as suppliers are used to servicing. And some of you may even fear that our services are going to become obsolete. I believe, and our panelists believe, that our clients need us, the suppliers, more than ever. Due to the complexity of these virtual roles. I mean, there's considerations to take into consideration includes time zone differences, how frequent the assignee needs to be on site, assignment country compliance, tax regulations, effective leadership due to the cross-cultural communication, talent development, and really most importantly, a successful assignment for the client companies that we're working with. And this is what our panelists today are going to talk about in this session. They're going to share with you the pitfalls, the opportunities, as well as some of the best practices that they want to share with us. And I think, you know, in every panel that we heard yesterday, we confirmed that our industry has to adapt and it has to adjust a lot due to COVID-19. And that we need to partner with our clients even more, and we need to reinvent parts of our services. So there's a lot to think about around virtual assignments that keep us awake at night. But Laura, I want to first ask you, what is it that's keeping your clients up at night? You know, what are you hearing from your clients?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's so basic, but it really sort of defines the whole situation, right? I have identified 5 areas of deepest concern, okay? And this applies to both international and, global movement as well as domestic movement. And when I say domestic movement, that doesn't necessarily mean the United States, even though I'm sitting here in the United States. I didn't mention that, but you can probably tell by my accent. So the top 5, in no particular order, because for every company, I would say it's different, are immigration challenges, flexible approaches, like how do we suddenly add flexibility if we didn't already have it, or how do we adapt what was already flexible to the changing environment, which changes literally every day. Duty of care, the need for companies to ensure the health and safety and, of course, well-being of their employees. And then at the same time, the most challenging thing maybe is the balance between employee experience, making sure our folks have a good experience still in the face of all this adversity, and also all the while controlling costs. So it's kind of like magic, but it happens. We're hearing some really great stories. We're part of some of those great stories. You are too. So those would be the top 5.
Thank you, Laura. Lucy, what changes are you hearing from clients? What are they foreseeing in the future?
So we actually just did a pulse check quite recently, a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting, some of the things that came back. Certainly the concerns are very much in line with what Laura was just saying: compliance, return on investment. When is that not a worry for our clients, right? But that's obviously still at the forefront. The employee engagement and well-being. And I think there seems to be this need and concern about how do we have synergy between what the needs for the business are, the business goals, because they have to survive, they have to stay viable, they have to keep themselves current and moving forward and developing in a very difficult marketplace, whilst still maintaining their brand, looking after their brand and looking after their employees, and it's difficult. And I think some of the changes that they identified in the survey was definitely remote working, potentially less relocation for the foreseeable. Some mentioned even until 2023, which is obviously means we have to long-term consider what we're going to do about adapting to the changes in relocation. Interestingly, a lot said, over 40%, that they felt that they were going to have to invest more in soft services, like cultural training and leadership training, to help all these diverse teams work more effectively together. And, from our perspective also with the spouse partner, because attracting dual career families and couples to move in a global recession as a result of the pandemic, adds a different dimension and different challenges. So yeah, those are the sorts of changes that they were implementing. But just to end on a positive note, because I'm a half full kind of person, over 70% of the people that responded said that their organizational culture still strongly values the skills and experiences that assignees get from global relocations and global mobility. So that at least gives me hope that, yes, we're going through some changes and things are going to be difficult, but ultimately those drivers are still there, and global mobility will reinvent itself, but will still be important.
Thank you, Lucy. Very interesting information. Kay, what is keeping your clients up at night, or your team? Any feedback that you've received?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of context, because I'll say the unintentional virtual assignee.
You are.
And coming on I'll say a family trip and then a business trip. And then in the course of recognizing that Asia was first out with COVID-19, and then looking at quarantines, made a determination to stay in North America, to stay for a meeting. And then one thing rolled onto the other, and lo and behold, then flights are canceled and borders are locked down. So in the focus of continuing to do work, I'm a assignee working, and most days my typical day is from 8 p.m. till 5:30 in the morning. And recognizing that if I'm sitting on my client side and I have an individual such as myself that actually isn't in their current home doing their current teamwork in their current office, not by cause of anything that I have actual control of. The thing that's keeping me up at night is that uncertainty, and also the well-being of that individual wherever they are. And I manage a number of team members who are going through exactly the same that I am, that are continuing to manage their team. So we become somewhat like the octopus, right? Our arms are all out there trying to hold on to something to give us a sense of normalcy. And I think the most, I'll say it's frustrating, but at the same time, we're hearing it more and more, the words, this is unprecedented, the waiting for the new normal. Right? A virtual assignment, there may have been individuals out there on virtual assignment, but it wasn't the new normal that we were living to. So of keeping us awake at night is that uncertainty. As human beings, we like to know what's going to go on and have a sense of control around our environment and what we're doing. I can only control myself and my reactions to what is occurring. I have no ability to control what's out there. I may want to encourage a government to open a border, but I don't have the ability to do that to make a difference, to be where I might need to be. So the lack of control and unknown, and that takes us to a dark place in our mind, in the back of our mind, and very often the worst case scenarios. The sense of wanting to do something that I can no longer do may become the focus, becomes the distraction, which then is about the productivity and the effectiveness of the individual that's on that assignment. And the making sure that we have the communication channels to support that virtual assignment signing. And I think that'll take you into some of the next questions as we go forward.
Thank you, Kay. I can definitely relate to the lack of control keeping me up at night, I know. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. We definitely don't want to be negative in this panel, but we do, I think just with the subject matter expertise that we're seeing in this panel already, you know, we do want to bring up some of the potential pitfalls to be mindful of. With regards to virtual versus the physical assignment. I mean, we really are focusing on the fact that this is supposed to be an assignment. These individuals are supposed to normally be in a host country managing a team locally. And so, you know, I guess that is the question I have for the panelists is what is the potential pitfalls that come to mind with regards to these non-physical moves? Lucy, would you like to lead?
I would. I'd like to start. I read an article recently by McKinsey, and it was called Reimagining the Workforce, or Post-Pandemic Workforce. And it just had a line in it, which I just wanted to share. It said, history shows that mixing virtual and on-site working might be a lot harder than it looks. And I thought, you don't say. There are a lot of obvious pitfalls around the virtual assignment, and obviously compliance is usually front and center when we're talking about that. I don't want to detract from that. It should be front and center, but it's not my sphere of expertise. So I wanted to talk around some of the other issues that perhaps not been as widely discussed so far. These being employee welfare, mental health and well-being, employee engagement, productivity and success, and then talent retention, development and succession planning. And those are the three areas that I think are big, should be big red flag areas for organizations if they're not already, and us as subject matter expertise should be guiding our clients around these subjects. Employee welfare and mental health, I think, you know, that has been quite prominent within global mobility for some time. I think most of the conferences that I attended last year had at least one discussion around mental health of business travellers and assignees. You know, we're well versed on it being an issue. I think as well, there's been a lot recently written about the impact on mental health on just working from home. But, you know, we're not talking about working from home here. We're talking about the full-on virtual assignment where you're like Kay, where you are doing a job that is based in one country from another location. And that brings with it a whole different range of issues and problems. You know, as Kay mentioned there, she's working effectively, she's a shift worker, she's working night shifts, you know, and that is not something that everybody can do. And that does have a toll on, it takes its toll on you physically, emotionally, mentally, with your relationships, your family life, your work-life balance. And I think, you can end up feeling like you're in some kind of twilight zone, right? Where you're not quite connected in your physical location, but you're not necessarily fully located in your host location. So you can kind of live this disembodied experience and life through a screen. And that does come up with a lot of issues for mental health and for well-being, feelings of isolation. And we can't ignore those. We ignore those at our peril, and they do need to be taken into consideration by companies. Not only because of the duty of care that we have and that they have to their employees, but because of the knock-on effect that it then has on engagement, productivity, and success. When we think about what motivates us in our jobs, what gets us all up and going in the morning, what keeps us productive and really into it, is a lot of the time it is that human interaction. It's the human side of things that means that we take a lot out of the jobs that we do and makes us want to put in more. I think in a virtual world and in a virtual assignment especially, keeping that level of engagement, keeping that level of motivation is difficult, and there need to be good measures put in there to help make sure that is actually what's happening, that people are engaged and they're successful and likewise productive, and the company gets what they need out of the assignee and out of the assignment. And I think for the productivity and success, it's really vital that employees going on a virtual assignment have absolutely everything they need in their toolbox to be successful. Otherwise, we're setting them up for failure right from the very beginning. And I think, we can't assume just because somebody isn't physically relocating doesn't mean that they don't need relocation assistance and don't need some of those services that we all know and respect and value, and they have to have those there. I think we also have to encourage our clients to have the discussion is this person right for this virtual assignment? Clearly define the role and the objectives and what they need from it. Does it need to be a virtual, or can it be a 3-month? What is it we need? And consider the qualities and the skills that somebody needs, because it's very different, I think, from physical to a virtual. You can have somebody who's really dynamic, who can work a room and who's got loads of energy, and that won't necessarily translate on a screen. You might need something very different to draw out the best of people on a virtual than in a real life scenario. So right from the very start, there needs to be a very clear understanding about what the skills are, what's required for this position. As Kay already mentioned, the communication is vital. Without proper, full, clear communication, we're almost doing this assignment, and that comes in many forms. And I think we've probably all been in that team meeting or the Zoom meeting where there's assuming you can even get everyone on the screen, there's somebody sitting there going, nodding their head, but are they really listening? And what are they actually hearing? Are they buying into what you say? And more importantly, are they going to act on it? Are they going to go out and do those things that you need them to do as a result of that? And when you're sitting around a table in a room, you can pick up on all the little nuances and the body language, and you can read it. It takes a very different skill set to be able to do that from a screen. And I think that communication and the empathy and the emotional intelligence is going to be very important for anybody doing a virtual assignment, so that they don't miss those things and they really get those. And as, of course, a natural accompaniment to that, as we discussed in our little panel practice sessions, the importance of cultural training. This is important, I think, for anybody every time they're going on a global assignment. I think it's even doubly important on a virtual. Assignees need to be trained on the cultural differences so that they know how to express and communicate to their team, as well as to get what they need from their team. And we also discussed the importance, perhaps not only of the assignee having that cultural training, but the team in the host location having that training as well, so that there's a natural synergy and an understanding of who this person on the screen is and where they're coming from and what they're talking about, but what they're imparting and what they want to get from them. And also recognizing that in some cultural hubs, you're not just talking about one culture. you know, you could be in an office in Dubai and you could have 4, 5, 6 nationalities and different on a team. So that cultural piece, I think, becomes even more important. But as I said, on a 360 basis, really. And that investment in that cultural understanding, in team development and in leadership coaching, you know, it's vital to ensure that everybody's working together, because as we know, one of the other pitfalls and challenges is the challenge to innovation and collaboration. And there's been a lot said about that, you know, companies missing that with remote working. Same applies, it's harder in virtual. You're not having those opportunities, have that spark, and where these ideas will germinate and really, really come through to the fore. So companies and organizations have to give assignees, virtual assignees, those tools to really make sure that there's that proper communication and that collaboration. And, you know, technology is great, but it does have its limitations with that. And lastly, with that piece in the pitfall is when we consider that one of the key drivers in sending people on global assignments is talent development, right? Isn't it? It's to take them away and out into a different location where you get those skills and experience that you're not going to get from anywhere else. And I'm sure many people on the listening, you know, we've lived and worked in more than one country, and you know that being fully immersed in that country gives you something, you know, skills and experience that you're not going to get if you're doing that role virtually. And that is even more amplified by the fact not only are they not getting that full immersion in the overseas experience, but nor are they getting the learning opportunities to learn from their peers and mentors and other leaders, because they're not even in the office. So there is a skills gap that's going to develop for organizations. So for developing and retaining their talent, they do have to consider what other measures do we need to put in this gap, you know, to address this gap. Is it mentoring? Is it executive coaching? Is it, you know, whatever solutions that they can come up with? But I think all of these pitfalls, you know, they're not insurmountable, but if they're ignored, they are significant and will have an impact not only on the individuals, but on the organization as a whole.
Thank you, Lucy. Very interesting, and we will talk about opportunities as well, so that you don't think we're completely negative about everything. But Kay, I would really be interested in knowing just, you know, which areas do you think we should be considering, especially because you're living it, your team is living it. You know, what areas should we be considering as being mindful about, what pitfalls?
Yeah, and as a leader of an organization, and also, you know, mindful of what's occurred in my life, I have 5 words, and I'll frame them out of what I'm meaning related to these. Isolation, the productivity, the morale, the collaboration, and then how we leverage technology, right? And that could take us into that positive element. But on the isolation, you know, we're human beings. We're used to going to the water cooler, having a conversation. As we said, whether in a meeting, you get a feel of the individuals. You know, we socialize. We're not really, you know, creatures that just want to hunker down, unless you're really an introvert and you're totally taking this on. In the productivity, you know, we can look at, you know, our organization in many ways is, I'll say, quite old school. We expect to see people in an office, and that means that they're working. It isn't about the hours. It's about whether employees are happy. Are they engaged? Because if they are happy, just get out of their way and let them go. But if they are in a virtual assignment or on any work that is different and uncomfortable for them, the pitfall that's occurring is that they become less engaged. They're not really sure what to do, so they may lean out versus leaning into whatever is going on. It really speaks to the trust in your organization, strong relationships, and access to the right technology to keep them connected. Imagine if we didn't have internet and we were in COVID-19. You know, if I went back 100 years ago, you know, would I be sending a messenger and the carrier pigeon to get that message? And what would the speed of business be, right? So looking at that productivity. And Lucy referenced about mental health and the morale of the individuals, right? We need to lead by example. You need to have a cheerleader from time to time, a mentor, or somebody that can actually help. And really listening skills We use very often our eyes and our mouth way more than, you know, what we should be doing. We really need to be listening and ramping up recognition, right? When somebody's on a virtual assignment, keeping them connected, because all of these topics tie back to how do we maintain the company culture and how do we go forward with productivity? And that collaboration interaction, looking at different tools, and it leads us into the technology and innovation that we've brought. You know, prior to COVID-19, I didn't even know Zoom existed, right? I might have been a WebEx girl or WhatsApp or something else. But we look to different tools to help us. And I'll leave it with that point. But the other thing that I really recognize, and it's a pitfall and an opportunity, is recognizing on virtual assignments the vulnerability of the individual that's on that assignment. And looking at all of us today, we actually have invited everyone into our home. It may be our office without somebody else there. But if I was at a Euro conference, I wouldn't have invited you into my home. And this becomes part of the virtual assignment challenge of also creating the environment that's their work environment that gives them a professional identity. And I may have in my past identified with the physical office. And that for many is huge, of losing a sense of face, especially as I look at our Asia context. And that's where I find many of our virtual managers are really struggling, because that identity and the power, the control they felt being in an office has been taken away.
Thank you. Thank you, Kay. Laura, on a RMC side, you know, what pitfalls are you seeing maybe in the other areas that we haven't yet discussed so far?
Well, you know, both Lucy and Kay did such a great and thorough job of describing. I mean, what we're seeing isn't really all that different, because we're hearing the same concerns from our HR partners and collaborators. I think there's definitely, you know, the old buzzword we've been saying forever, which is getting tired, but I have to say it, you know, global mobility needs a seat at the HR table or sorry, at the executive table. And it's like, hello, if you don't have it now, you're never going to have it. I mean, what we keep hearing is, you know, I'm one of those half full people too. So this has been the ultimate opportunity, right? Because, you know, HR inside corporate and us folks, RMCs and all of you, we've all had to collaborate, and we've been the backbone of the duty of care for so many companies. And, you know, we couldn't do it without all you too. Let me please say that, because having the information on the ground and being able to tap into that, or, you know, from the very earliest days, that was so important you know, especially with our clients that were operating in Asia Pacific. So I'd have to say, I agree with everyone here that the pitfalls are really all about the long term. You know, in the beginning, it's like cultural adaptation, right? In the beginning, it was like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? And then we kind of all got used to it, and then it got to be burnout, and it comes in waves, like for all of us. And all of our lack of ability, I had a crystal ball, I forgot to bring it. But anyway, our inability to, you know, really, you know, fully predict what's going to happen. Nobody knows. I mean, look, this morning we woke up to the news that Trump has tested positive, right? So who knows? But anyway, I think the key pitfalls are really the long-term burnout and the long-term, is this really going to work? I mean, I have clients now who, you know, I've been talking with since the early days, clients who had a lot of volume in and out of Asia. So, you know, who've been at this the longest and who are saying, we can't do this anymore. We have to put people back on assignment. And the virtual assignment is okay for some roles, but in manufacturing, we can't manufacture anything from home. Mm-hmm. So there is, you know, a growing feeling that we have to come up with solutions. We really do. As for Weicker in particular, we were already very well set up for virtual work. Many of us already worked at least, you know, in a hybrid situation. We rolled that out a few years ago. So almost every position was entitled to work 2 days from home. So we did some practice sessions on let's have everybody work from home for the whole day before things got really bad, before we closed down. So like there hasn't, thankfully for us, we've been able to have really good business continuity. But the long-term implications are, we've got to have a focus on the duty of care. So as much as we can say on the one hand, we can't long-term always have virtual assignments. There's always going to be some need for movement. On the other, if that's the case, then we absolutely must have duty of care. So, I think that kind of sums it up. There's the whole world of compliance, which I know we all would love to talk about, but I know personally just enough to get myself in trouble. I know that my client, and I tell my clients all the time, we must bring in your immigration provider. We must bring in your tax provider because it's very complicated and every fact pattern is different. Like maybe Tracy has dual citizenship, but right now, I'm making this up, but I feel like you do. Yeah, that's right. I thought so. So like if you're still paying taxes in the US, but you're living in France, and now you suddenly decide you're going to go back to the United States and work for a while, that's another huge thing that we're starting to see are all these folks who are saying, oh, well, if I'm working virtually, I want to just be a remote worker. So that's yet another category, right? The person who says, you know what, I'm going to go to Barbados for the months of January and February. Why not? Right. And I just decide to do that on my own. Oh, that's no good. Or what about the situation where a company desperately needs a particular employee and they say, if you don't let me do this, I'm going to leave. I mean, they don't explicitly say that, but you have that concern, right? The engagement, the burnout. And this person says, I want to go work and live in Barbados. So that's your remote worker. What kind of support do you give that person? Right. I mean, so that's an area what's keeping us busy. I should have mentioned that before, as what's keeping me up at night is coming up with new policy types to meet all these demands. So, and our HR partners are coming to us with that too. And so that brings us back to what I said in the first place. This is the moment, we really have an opportunity to be extremely strategic and supportive to our clients, and with your help. I'll just say that again, with all parties. It's not just an RMC role, it's all of us working together.
Thank you, Laura, and perfect segment into the next question. So thank you for that. Because we do want to really bring out, I want you panelists to speak about the opportunities that these virtual assignments can bring as suppliers. Like Laura said, it's all suppliers, and bringing your expertise, your partnership, your, just your, in French we say savoir-faire, your knowledge, to these HRs, to your clients, because they're trusting us to make sure that these virtual assignments are taking place, and because they have to right now potentially, or that hybrid virtual assignment. So what does what are those opportunities that we can speak of as suppliers, and how will you sell the return on investment to your clients on some of these extra services that we're hearing might be pitfalls or areas that we need to consider? So, Kay, would you like to start this?
Sure.
Question.
Well, I'm gonna actually start with the ROI piece, because I think this is an unknown. We don't know what we don't know. I think the element that we have most discussions when we're speaking with our clients, and whether it's RMCs, it's other DSP partners, or our clients direct, it's really about the potential of the failed assignment, whether it's virtual or real. And what are the tools and what are the resources that we can provide? And a couple of things that I recognize, and I'm going to read a quote because I think this also helps give us a bit of context. And it's a Charles Darwin quote. It's not the most intellectual or strongest that survives, but the one that is able to best adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. Now, if I took ourselves back a year ago and where our teams were talking about, our scope of work, our service delivery, our process, our consultative behavior, it's quite different than if I fast forwarded 6 months into where we are today. And I think the value of the consultative conversation and really ensuring that we have that active listening of what our clients are going through. If I think back in my 20 or so years, there have always been virtual assignments, but it tended to be the anomaly versus perhaps a new normal or a paradigm that would be continuing. And now with virtual assignments, because of an absolute watershed pivot point, a moment in time which changed every one of us, that this transformed us, and it's our nimbleness and our flexibility. And the opportunity really is, and even through these sessions, to hear something that somebody might be doing. We have, for our teams, we have a product service offering that we didn't have before. We have new toolkits that we have stretched our team members. We were, I'll say in some ways, a little old school DSP that we always had to be in person and with a person to deliver those services. And within days, I'll say weeks, because of over the 13 countries and all the team members, of having, sending, again, in safe environment space, of putting together videos. And many of them, we can't go out because we're in complete lockdown. Well, there are so many photographs and so many tools that you can actually put together through technology that gave us an opportunity to provide services that we could provide virtually. And for the virtual transferee, there also comes the question of what time zone are they in and who is actually supporting them and how we're supporting them. So looking to our teams that perhaps we flex to fit in our time zone, but also looking to partners in other jurisdictions to have a blended approach to provide a service. Also thinking about, well, I'm a DSP, I may also be looking to engage somebody in the cross-cultural or spousal support or in the education area, because we need to have a different set of tools in order to provide them. So the opportunities that I see is really the transformation and embracing that change and not being fearful of it, leaning in, being able to reinvent and adjust the services with that active listening of what our customer actually wanted. And then what does that virtual assignee need, as well as the HR and the RMC that might be supporting them. And then looking at how we actually can deliver on that. With COVID-19, I will tell you, we are spending way more time in delivering the services and being able to also have conversations about the consultative value of the time base that we spend versus the physical face time. So I think I'm going to leave it with that and pass it on back to you, Tracy.
Thanks. Thank you. Super interesting. And every time we've discussed, I learn more things. So I've been the fortunate one to prepare this panel. Laura, you did mention some of the opportunities under the pitfalls, and maybe now you can embellish a little bit more. What type of opportunities present themselves for the suppliers that you're working with, for the RMC themselves, and what new roles should we have as global mobility suppliers?
It's a great question. Early on in the presentation, maybe it was the first question, I talked about those 5 things that keep our clients up at night. And at the end, I mentioned that mix between how do you preserve the employee experience at the same time you achieve cost control. So it's the ultimate puzzle. It's always been, and now it's just highlighted and exacerbated by the current situation. So early on, we saw our DSPs in particular. I think there was some huge opportunities there to modify the service delivery model. And so that hybrid approach to putting things, well, for some period of time, it was like 100% virtual, but then coming up with solutions as the rules of the game changed and as things open up and then close back again, moving in and out between, a fully virtual experience to one where, there's some pre-work done virtually, and then, at the last minute, maybe looking at 1 or 2 properties versus looking at 10. So that has translated into an opportunity. Nearly everyone I've spoken to in your world, DSP world, has said, we're going to keep this because this offers a less expensive alternative to companies who want to provide these kinds of services to employees, on an ongoing basis where they may not be able to spend as much as they did before. So I think that these hybrid services, you see it in cross-cultural, and you see it in language training. Now, granted, I think Lucy certainly would agree, based on what you said earlier, that delivering cross-cultural training is not nearly as effective if you're doing it online, but it's still better than nothing. And then I think that there's an opportunity to develop, and I've seen some of this already, how to run a virtual meeting, and now how to see behavioral body language, more emphasis maybe on body language in the cross-cultural training. You can't see everything about my body language, but you can sure see that I'm talking with my hands a lot. So I think that there are opportunities for new products, new services that we've started to move into, and I think we'll move into more. I sit in a unique position because I'm not in the day-to-day operation, but certainly from where I'm sitting, there's been just an inundation of questions and a request to respond, for thought leadership. I can't tell you how many panels and presentations I've been involved in because, probably within most RMCs, there's a role something like mine where, I touch on almost all of our 500 clients sooner or later. I mean, in the 8 years or so that I've been here. So just being able to see the huge disparities between industries, I'm able to, those, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So, this industry needs this and that industry needs that, and everyone needs a solution to the burnout, right? So one of the things that's come up a lot lately, it's always been on the table, it's no surprise, is those who have always had a traditional policy framework wanting to move to a core flex, or they want to move to adding a COVID-related addendum to their policies. Rotational assignments. So that's like just in the last couple of weeks, people are saying, well, if we have, if extended business travel is not really very efficient because people are going to have to quarantine for 28 days, 14 on the front end and 14 on the back end, what about transitioning extended business travel to a type of a rotational assignment? So that type of assignment that's been in play for, oil and gas and other manufacturing companies forever. Now maybe that's a solution. Instead of a short term and instead of an EBT, is this idea of putting people on a rotation schedule. And that can work I know that kind of moves off topic a little bit, but that can be a possibility for that virtual assignment, right? So for Kay, instead of having to spend all your time backwards, maybe you do 28 days on the Hong Kong, on the Asia Pacific schedule, and then you have 20 days where you're like on the North America schedule, and you can reconnect with, your non-vampire tendencies. So that's what I see as the opportunities from the RMC working with our DSPs, understanding how you've adapted. Gee, is there a new product there? Is there a new opportunity to offer a new service or a hybrid service or a new policy type where you'd be able to support us? I mean, who knows, with a rotational physical or a rotational assignment that includes some remote work, because that could happen too, right? You could maybe physically go to the place, but have to be working from your home office in that place. So that's more like remote work, I would call that, rather than a virtual assignment.
Thank you. Lucy, any extra thoughts on opportunities, maybe more on the soft side, softer skills that and the different benefits that sometimes are forgotten in policy with virtual assignments?
Yeah, I think actually the first thing I would like to say about virtual assignments as an opportunity is diversity and inclusion. I think it does open up the doors for some people who would not necessarily have had that opportunity to take on a role like that because of, you know, a number of other reasons and commitments and issues that, you know, it's something that Tracy and I, we've been passionate about for a long time, but, you know, there has been, as we know, a lot of buzz about D&I over the years in our sector and the challenges it faces. This could be a good opportunity to do something about that, and I think that should be celebrated. In terms of the soft side, yeah, I mean, another just little quote I want to take from that McKinsey report, that it said, avoiding the pitfalls of remote working or virtual working requires thinking carefully about leadership and management in a hybrid virtual world. Interactions between leaders and teams provide an essential conduit for creating the social cohesion and the unified hybrid virtual culture that organizations need in the next normal. And we've all mentioned this, you know, keeping that culture, keeping that cohesion is really important. And so that the opportunities that we have are with those softer side, as both Laura and Kay have mentioned. And because companies are not physically relocating, there's not the same level of expense spent on some of those, you know, harder essential relocation services. There is perhaps an opportunity for us to really be strategic partners and say, you know what, yep, you need to invest in the cultural training. And we have, you know, developed our cultural training so that we do, it is done virtually, it can be done virtually, it's use of a platform and one-on-one coaching that is done in a virtual setting, but it still gives somebody that need, and it's actually in real time, so it can be sometimes more effective than just that lump sum. So we've looked at our offering and thought, okay, this is what we need to do to really make it impactful and hit where it needs. Likewise, the leadership coaching, the team, you know, and it's not just about how to do it in a remote basis, but, you know, looking at companies are restructuring, they're exiting, they are reducing their workforces. There's not just the global mobility that is in play there. So for some people, it's a case of that there's fear about the long-term future of their position and what they get. And so by investing properly in their organization and in this, in the culture, in the coaching, in the leadership, in the management, and the team building, that's how companies can really, really ensure that they can ride out all of these blips, get the most out of their talent and their employees, and still continue their long-term growth and development. And I think also there is an opportunity to create perhaps new and different jobs, you know, that hadn't been possible in the future or hadn't been considered before. And I think that can be exciting. And I think we all need to remember not to be afraid of the changes that are happening and just try to react as best we can. And we do have those tools and we do have that expertise. And I think, you know, there is that opportunity to really push everything forward.
Thank you. Isn't it a little ironic that, I'm saying this positively, but that Eura chose innovation as part of the theme for 2020 without really knowing what was going to be happening this year? Innovation is definitely something that we all have to consider in order just to survive. I am looking, and there are some questions that have been written out. So I'm just going to ask the panelists to you know, answer as they can. But one of them was a really interesting one. Are virtual assignments really efficient? What are the pros and cons? And I mean, we did talk a little bit about it, but does somebody want to just respond to that question?
I'll start. Yeah, I'll start. And I did want to also frame out something I didn't say. And, you know, when we're talking about the opportunity and the pitfalls, I think it's really important when I mentioned that, you know, virtual assignments, there have always been some, and perhaps it was because of family circumstances, perhaps it was, you know, if you look at some war zones or other locations that may not have been safe, there might have been some things that are occurring. This has been an inflection point for us, right? Where we pivot and there's more of these virtual assignments. It's really important that we have a framework, and it isn't the back of the cocktail napkin ad hoc scenario in how we're delivering on these services. And that, again, that engagement of conversation, you know, we might have had one or two or things that bubbled up, but also making sure that our teams are communicating back with the RMCs that may be managing them to ensure that they're understanding what could be done. And then having the conversations with the clients to build out a framework of a policy so that then there are rules of the game. And again, you need that engagement for the compliance and the duty of care that we have to the individual and our fiduciary responsibility to our companies, that we're not crossing those, the rules and laws, norms of locations, right? Tax, immigration, and then you look at all of that, the other soft areas. But if I come back to, are they efficient? Are they effective? Depending on the circumstances, if I'm a personality that can actually work and doesn't mind doing that, not in time zone or in person, and can actually do my job virtually, and I may be more productive in a home environment, it can be extraordinarily effective. If we are somebody that is not my gig and I really am struggling and not surviving, my mental health and my effectiveness can blow out the efficiency right there. Mm-hmm. So I think we also need to make sure that, the tools of the pre-assessment for the individual going on assignment are more valuable now in a virtual assignment scenario than I believe even like sending somebody, because you talk about failed assignments being majority between English speaking countries, right? And we would have these topics that would come up at conferences. Well, take this into a virtual environment now. And I'm not talking virtual reality. And I do think virtual assignments will live on, but perhaps not at the level that they are now. Some will look at it, oh, this is more cost effective because I don't have the cost or cost of living changes. And perhaps I can now have somebody working in a less costly location who can effectively do their job. But it takes a skill set. And there is the very real concern for many CEOs, and I actually was reading a study last night about the impact that this is going to have in the company culture and the engagement and the talent development, because you'll have people out there in pockets that may not be communicating as much, that could be doing great work, but not visible. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pass it on to others, because it ties back to, it depends. It's a great consultative answer, but it really depends.
So actually there's another question that kind of ties with this really efficiency of the virtual assignment. The question is, does this call into question what positions are suitable to virtual assignments? Is it a question of accountability versus responsibility? Would we not say that most senior positions are virtual already? Anyone who want to dare answer that question? And I do agree with you, Kay, that I think the virtual assignment is, first of all, not necessarily for everyone. And I do think that there's some senior managers that wouldn't necessarily do well virtually. Let's take the example Laura said on the car industry or some kind of industry like that. They might be senior managers, but they are hands-on individuals, and that's their skill set. And so I am curious to know what your opinion is on this question, on would we not say that most senior positions are virtual already? Is it a question of accountability versus responsibility? Laura, do you want to try to answer that?
I think I don't mean to punt on it, but I think, again, it depends on, a lot on the industry and what that person's role is and how they perform that role. So like, if I just think in my own world, our leadership at Weichert, sure, our top leadership is very much virtual. They're managing people globally, so they can't be everywhere all the time. So yes, it's a combination. And I think if your top leaders are in global roles already, then there's I would argue that they are already performing in a somewhat virtual capacity. I think, like we see so often, a person could be really great at their job and have all the skills. And it happens often that person, it's assumed that you take this person who's great at their skills and you put them on assignment and they're going to continue to be great, and they're not always. In fact, sometimes they really fail, unfortunately. And that's because it's a different skill set. So I don't know if that answers the question, but you said, tell me again, was it accountability or depends on?
Responsibility versus
responsibility.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went to the next question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it goes back to, what are they doing more rather, I mean, I think that's the same thing, right? Is their focus more on accountability or on responsibility? And some seniors are, answering to stockholders, and some senior managers feel that they're answering directly to their clients and their people, right? Rather than stockholders. So that plays a role. And we are all all of us in mobility, we're in the people business. So if your people don't feel well supported and your people don't have any interest in, staying with the company, then you're in trouble. You can't deliver global mobility services without the people.
So I think it comes down again to industry specific in that sense.
Right.
The global mobility world virtually works quite well. Maybe DSP are probably the ones who have had to adapt, or home search as well, but the most. But it's true, as coaches, we probably live already very much in a virtual world. I like a comment that Renee Stegman said, technical skills make up 15% of a successful assignment, and the balance is adaptability and integration is what makes the assignment ultimately successful. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So thank you, Renee. Any other thoughts on that side of, well, there's another question that actually maybe we have 2 minutes to answer before the end of the session. How has the employer duty of care transformed with virtual assignments? And this ties a lot with virtual remote workers as well, I would say. But if any of you want to maybe take a stab at that.
I'll jump in. I have seen, I will say, between, and if I take my hands, like depending on which way it swings, of companies that are so focused on the duty of care that they've effectively closed down their business of anything that's occurring and that everything is virtual. And we have others that are balancing risk and responsibility and requesting added services, added PPE, added focus and care and attention, and again, future thinking and rethinking the way we're working. And having very engaged conversations so that they can continue. So I'm seeing, I would say everybody's focused on duty of care. I also recognize we've had companies come to us that have said that they have very deep concerns about the potential litigious issues, not now, but maybe in a year or a couple of years later, as an impact of things that are occurring in mobility and COVID-19 related. So the duty of care and the mindfulness and seeking counsel of what you can and can't do, and what we're asking our people to do in today's environment. So I would say it depends. It's really a broad one.
Yes, it is. It is.
And we're asked to do a lot more services, I'll tell you that, in that duty of care. We'll leave it with that.
There's a lot more opportunities for all suppliers out there.
Yes.
Lucy, any last word of advice before we get cut off?
No, I would just agree with what Kay said, and just say, the duty of care is real and it's important, and we have to be mindful and take good care of our talent, because that's the future. And ignore it at its peril. And yes, there is that balance between not shutting down everything and being so mindful of it that we're too scared to do anything else, but maybe just thinking, do we need to put that person on assignment? Why are we sending them there? What is the purpose? Are they the right person? And make sure we have everything in place, all the tools that we have to make sure that we do look after them. And then they will look after us in the future.
And they will be very happy clients, which is what we want.
That's right.
So thank you so much. An amazing panel. I'm just mindful that Michael is going to cut us off. So thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, audience.
Yeah, thank you.